and welcome back. Now, the newly appointed commissioners at the CRL Rights Commission have hit the road running, and they met this week to discuss various strategic programs as well as interventions planned for the next few years. The 13 members say that they'll execute their work without fear, favour or prejudice in their quest to promote and protect the cultural, religious and linguistic rights of all South Africans. And to tell us more about this, we're joined now by the CRL Rights Commission's Chairperson, Professor David Mosoma. Thanks so much for coming through this morning, Professor.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you so much, Sakina.
And you, of course, are not a newcomer to the Commission. You have served as the deputy there. Over these years, what has been, some of the most notable moments that have stood out for you?
For the past 5 years, when we started, we thought the terrain was going to be easy sailing. And we discovered, I think, when we look at the three important key areas, focus areas, focus areas such as religion, culture, and language, the most area that had problems for us or challenges was religious sector. So because of the many things that were happening there, they provided a lot of challenges. But that did not stop us from focusing as well on the cultural areas, on the linguistic areas. But our biggest focus was how to deal with the sector that had introduced a number of practices which South Africans were not used to, such as drinking petrol, eating grass and eating rats. But remember that in other parts of Africa or of the world, eating snake is not a problem. They eat snakes. In some places they eat rats. But not as Christian religious environment. So they eat it as part of their cultural issues. But I think introducing those in the Christian context created jittery in the South African context. Hence the focus that came to our way. But even more was the reaction of the sector, especially. Some of them came to us armed, threatening violence on us, which we had to make sure that we call for protection and screening of people entering the place. Because initially, we thought we were dealing with issues that are much more innocent. Nobody is going to rise against us. So those were the issues that we dealt with, issues of abuse of women and children, defrauding of Christians, using magic, hypnosis, and deceptions, all forms of things that have been introduced in the sector. And so, of course, we dealt with ease of language. We promoted the Khoi and San languages. The sign language also was part of our focus. The initiation schools where we had problems of deaths in initiation schools. For example, we banned or suspended initiation schools in Gauteng as a result for almost 2 years. And they reopened just in March. But already we have experienced 2 deaths. And those are the areas that kept us going.
Professor, and these are very important areas that you operate in, but what powers does the Commission actually have to adequately do its work?
When we look into our act that gives our existence, the powers we have is to refer and recommend. In other words, there are legal issues that we cannot handle ourselves, but we can refer to human rights, we can refer to SABC, we can refer to some activities to Home Affairs. Those are the referrals that we have. And finally, we recommend or write reports with recommendations to Portfolio Committee, which finally ends up in Parliament, for Parliament either to make take a legal position on those. So the issue, for example, of commercialization of religion, we suggested forms of how to deal with that. I think the Parliament will be seized with the report this year, and our meeting just 3 weeks ago the portfolio committee indicated they would like to meet with us in order for us to brief them once more, for them to be able to take on the issue of the issues emanating from the report, as it were.
And taking over from Togo Mkwanazi Kaluva, Professor Mosoma, what are some of the cases that you are currently dealing with?
The first case that they're dealing with is Sharon Zondi. Remember that it's a Omotoso case.
Yes.
We should be giving support, but remember we don't have the resources to support her, but I think we'll support her emotionally as a commission. But also we have just looked into what we call the development of new jurisprudence with regard to community rights. What happens when the act of a particular leader in a given environment, congregation, embarrasses the entire rights of the community? We have not looked into this, and we felt as a commission we need to broach or venture into looking at the new jurisprudence, whether the rights of communities cannot be protected.
That's very interesting.
Yes.
Give us an example of what you could be talking about here.
For example, if you says they must eat grass, okay, grass is for animals, but once they get down to eat, who gets embarrassed thereafter? It is the grass eaters as well as the congregants, if they are surprised. Oh, what is happening to us? So the community that is involved, take for example again the hypnosis. I'm not so sure sometimes they talk about it as part of spirituality, where somebody waves his hand like this and they all fall. And men and women fall, their skirts are flying around. Who gets embarrassed there? There are children there. Who gets embarrassed? The congregation. Now, what are the rights accorded not only to individual, because human rights deals with individual rights. What are the rights of the community in that particular instance? So we need to look at, is there a jurisprudence, a legal way, precedents that can be found to deal with this? It's a new area. There may have been some case law already that exists which we are not aware of, but it is important as far as the Act is concerned. What also gives us the energy is that we have got 2 advocates, 3 advocates in this commission this time around, and we hope that these matters of legal importance will be taken care of.
So quite apart from that, seeing that you did meet this week to look at strategic planning and a way forward, what are some of the priorities that you'll be focusing on?
We are looking at first at strengthening the organizational efficiency, because it's important to do that. Remember when the commission was established, one of the criticisms coming from the Perry report, which is a parliamentary appointed report, and Asmal report, was that the commission was corporatized, made into, you have people who are actually staying in the offices, and yet it was meant to be community-driven or community-centered. So we're dealing with that. But more importantly, to strengthen our capacity to ensure that we provide public education, because it's a spin-off there. But how did you want to do that? We want to strengthen and support the existing community councils that we have throughout South Africa, because these would become champions in communities, in local environment, to inform people about the work of the commission, and also to make sure that we get some of the key problems and challenges that are arising from the communities to the commission. And we feel that if we had resources, this would be one of the ways of creating what I call a movement, not an organization, a movement of people who are concerned about issues of culture, religion, and language in their local environment.
Well, thank you so much for coming through. That was Professor David Mosoma, who is, of course, the new chairperson of the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Cultural, Religious and Linguistic Communities, and sharing with us some of the plans that the Commission has for the future.